Good morning, Dominic Steele, Daily Bible Time, and it is Tuesday morning, and thanks again to those who have reached out to us over the death of my mother-in-law Janet on Saturday morning, and her funeral service will be 10 o'clock on Thursday morning, and the service is going to be streamed at villagechurch.sydney/Janet. And in Daily Bible Time, we're in the enormously confronting chapter of the Bible, 2 Samuel 13, the rape of Tamar, and really there's a trigger warning on Daily Bible Time this week. Let us read. We're picking up in Amnon's bedroom, and Tamar is present. She's delivered cakes to him, and she just cries out to him, "Don't, my brother, don't disgrace me. Such a thing should never be done in Israel. Don't commit this outrage." This is verse 12. "Where could I ever go with my humiliation? And you would be like one of the outrageous fools in Israel. Please speak to the king. He won't keep me from you." Now, I found a piece from Anna Carter Florence on this speech from Tamar, and she writes, Tamar delivers what is probably the most rhetorically perfect argument in Scripture, the case against rape, from start to finish in 7 irrefutable points. 1. No. I'm saying no. 2. You're my brother. 3. We don't do this in Israel. It's not who we are. 4. This act has an adjective, vile. 5. What would happen to me? I'd have nowhere to go. 6. What would happen to you? You would be one of the scoundrels in Israel. And 7. If it has to happen, if it's really about to happen, at least talk to Dad first. We know he won't withhold me from you. Now, Anna Carter Florence says it's an outstanding speech, especially when contrasted with Bathsheba's silence 2 chapters earlier. But it doesn't hold against Amnon's verbs, which are would not listen and being stronger. He was stronger, so he forced her because he could. He wanted, he took because he could. David's precedent with Bathsheba has struck another member of the family. That's Anna Carter Florence. And we go on in verse 14, and but he, Ammon, refused to listen to her, Tamar, because he was stronger than she was. He disgraced her by raping her. The verbs are terrible. Anna Carter Lawrence lists them: pretend, would not listen, send in, send out, take hold, force, bolt the door, tear, cry aloud, keep quiet, speak neither good nor bad, remain, and hate. They're awful. It's rape, it's abuse, it's betrayal of trust. And look, I know there'll be some engaging today who are thinking, this was me, it happened to me, somebody I trusted did that to me. And again, I'm so sorry. We only get a little time on this Daily Bible Time, and if it is the slightest, we'll appoint a potential pointer of use. I put up at villagechurch.sydney/abuse a presentation on domestic violence and 5 Pastor's Heart interviews where we have attempted to deal with different aspects of domestic violence or abuse. There's also our church's policy on domestic violence, and contact details of people you could speak to if you've been in this situation, if you are in this situation. villagechurch.sydney/abuse. The story plays out, verse 15, Amnon hated Tamar with such intensity that the hatred he hated her was greater than the love that he'd loved her. "Get out of here," he said. And Dr. Woodhouse says what had been, quote, love or desire was turned by the violation of sexual assault into hatred. He notes the psychological insight in this particular sentence is profound. It is hideous. Hideous because of the level of abuse that's involved, that what is so abused is meant to be so good. And this is John Woodhouse. He says a brother and sister should care for each other. Here, that good thing is violently abused. Sex, the power of sexual desire, is meant to be for the strengthening of love and commitment and unselfishness in marriage. And here, that good thing is abused into its opposite, into hatred, rejection, brutal selfishness. The greater the good in something, the greater the potential for evil in its abuse. And as Dr. Woodhouse notes, it is horrible. Tamar, she cries out when Amnon goes to reject her, "No, sending me away is much worse than the greater wrong you've already done." But he refused to listen. Instead, he called to the servant who waited on him, "Get this away from me. Throw her out. Bolt the door behind me." Amnon's servant threw her out and bolted the door behind her. Again, I'm going to go to Anna Carter Lawrence. She says Tamar's final set of verbs is breathtaking. It's a breathtaking act of resistance in the wake of the crime. In a rage of loathing, Amnon calls his servant, who painfully is within earshot, orders him to put this woman out, bolt the door after her, as if the very sight of her now is abhorrent. Tamar responds by tearing her robe, putting ashes on her head, taking to the corridors, crying aloud as she goes. It's a mourning script, but it's also prophetic. The prophets of Israel cry aloud in times of injustice, and she makes sure that everyone in the palace sees and hears, even though Amnon wouldn't. She makes a scene, one that any activist would admire, says Anna Carter Lawrence. Look at my wretchedness. Listen to me scream. I'll make sure your eyes are opened to what we've become in this palace. Tamar, 18, was wearing a long-sleeved robe because that's what the king's virgin daughters wore. She put ashes on her head, tore the long-sleeved robe she was wearing. She put her hand on her head and went away crying. Now, we're going to finish the narrative tomorrow. But to let you know where we're going, what's going to happen, David the king is angry, but he's weak, does not bring justice. So it's left to Tamar's full brother Absalom to bring justice for his sister, to avenge his sister, and that's what we're going to see tomorrow. Verse 20, her brother Absalom said to her, "Has your brother Amnon been with you? Be quiet for now, sister. He's your brother. Don't take this thing to heart." Tamar lived as a desolate woman in the house of her brother, and that's the last we see of Tamar. Her withdrawal from the community is reflected in her withdrawal from the biblical narrative. There's an outstanding conclusion to the Tamar story written by Deirdre Brower that I'm going to quote in full because really it does deserve that. She writes, "Tamar lives desolate, but her testimony does not end in desolation. Tamar's voice of wisdom and outrage speaks to us today. The biblical writers have honoured and preserved her voice for those willing to listen. She offers life-giving sustenance through her words of wisdom and her outrage against evil. Tamar confronts evil with truth. She speaks with authority on behalf of the narrator and laws and wisdom of Israel. The narrator validates Tamar's voice and bears witness to the multi-dimensional violence, its consequences, and the devastation of rape. Amnon represents godless foolishness, while Tamar represents godly wisdom." Deirdre Brower goes on, "Amnon forsakes wisdom, does not love wisdom, fails to call wisdom my sister. Because Amnon doesn't listen to wisdom, he forfeits life and favour from the Lord. Amnon hates wisdom, therefore loves death. In contrast, Tamar and wisdom call out, raise their voice, and speak what is right and true." Deirdre Brower again, "Both fear the Lord and hate evil. Pride and perverse speech. Both stretch out their hands, offer health, nourishment and life. Both possess sound judgment, understanding and power. Both offer advice and rebuke, yet are rejected and ignored. Tamar is remembered as a wise and valiant woman who offers life, who does good, not evil. She provides sustenance for her family. She girds herself with strength. She extends her hands to the needy. She wears fine linen, strength and honour. She speaks wisdom and the law of loving kindness. As a woman who fears the Lord, she's praised and honoured within the messianic life of Judah." And you do see Tamar honoured in the list of descendants in 1 Chronicles 3, and she's actually listed ahead of Solomon. Today, we honour Tamar. Thanks for joining us on Daily Bible Time. God bless.